25-30, 35-40, 45-50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
How far back is too far back? That's the question that we're asking as we begin part 2 of our Big 12 preview series here on the Three Technique, a college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes with Trey Reeves and Garrett Turney. I'm Mitch Mason. Glad you've continued to listen along in our preview series here for the 2024 season. If you're brand new to the show, have found us in the middle of this series or maybe in the middle of a previous conference, we'd love to have you subscribe. Join the road to 1,000 subscribers on Twitter, on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We would love to have you to continue the conversation with in the comments, offline, whatever it might be. Guys, we previewed the first 6 teams of the Big 12 in the first episode, on Monday's episode, and we were calling them the teams in waiting. Teams that certainly I think you could paint a rosy future, but 2024, probably not their year. That being said, outside of 5, maybe 6 teams, it feels like this conference is wide open this year. And while these may not be the top 5 championship contenders as voted on by the Jimmies and the Joes, I ask you, how far back is too far back as we start with number 10, Central Florida? Could a team like the Knights come up and win the Big 12 this season?
Yes, they could. And they could do it by having the combination of KJ Jefferson and Gus Malzahn. Because, guys, I don't know if there's a better quarterback other than Cam Newton to run Gus Malzahn's offense other than KJ Jefferson. Like, full stop.
Yeah.
Full stop. That, like, if you're painting a picture of how UCF can win a championship, it's Gus Malzahn and KJ Jefferson making offensive magic together.
In that offensive magic, I think relies on 2 things: the vertical passing game and the ability to just wear you down in the trenches. And UCF, I think, has the ability to do both this season.
Yeah, and I think they're going to rely obviously a lot on the run game. They have Penny Boone coming in. He was the MAC Offensive Player of the Year last year, ran for 1,400 yards. And they didn't even lose their starting running back from last year.
Yeah.
RJ Harvey is back after running for over almost 1,500 yards last year. So they're going to have 2 1,400-yard rushers, KJ Jefferson and what he can do with his legs. They bring in Javarius Johnson from Auburn to supplement the wide receiver core. And, you know, they brought in a ton of other guys on defense as well. 7 Power 5 conference transfers. They looked at what they did last year. They were the most successful G5 to Power 5 transfer team last year. They made a bowl game. They did it the hard way. They had a long losing streak in the middle of the season that they had to overcome. But they made a bowl game, and they looked at what they had, and they said, okay, we need to transform this roster. They got a ton of guys that have the linebacker core, especially rebuilding it to really adjust to the Big 12 speed that they really struggled with last year. They lost John Reese Plumlee, but like I said, I think KJ Jefferson is going to run this offense even better than Plumlee did. And Plumlee was an absolute treat to watch running this offense.
So as you look over this UCF team, and we'll get into their schedule in just a second, the over-under as we normally do, do you think that this is the year where Central Florida really makes that jump from really good group of 5 team that was playing in a power conference last year to a seat at the table?
Yeah, I think they do. And I think it is the influx of talent they got in the transfer portal, because they brought in 27 transfers. They lost 27 in the portal. 15 of the guys they brought in are from Power 5 schools. Only 5 that they lost landed at a Power 5 school. So there's an immediate talent upgrade. There's an immediate, upgrade of guys that have done it at a Power 5 school. And just for a program like UCF, this portal, it's going to be huge for them year in and year out. They did well in the transition year, but I really do think that they added enough in the portal this year to truly transform themselves into a team that can push for a Big 12 title. I don't know how close they're going to get this year, but I think they're going to continue to be the best suited, especially out of the 4 former American Conference and BYU teams, to push for that title.
It's a very interesting schedule because you've got New Hampshire and Sam Houston that should be very easy wins. You go to TCU. I think that's going to be, for me, maybe more of a proving ground for TCU than it is UCF. TCU will be expected to win that game at home. I think if they get that done, congratulations. Maybe Josh Hoover and the Shoots are a little bit more legit. If not, though, it raises a ton of questions for the Horned Frogs and props UCF up for a really fascinating run down the middle of that schedule. They've got 7 games in a row without a bye week, which I feel like the vast majority of teams that we've previewed so far this season and in this series, they kind of go 4-4-4 with bye weeks separating that middle tier of games. That's not the case for the Knights. They've got a bye week after the first 3 games, 7 in a row, and then maybe crucially, one right before a road trip to West Virginia and a home game against Utah.
Yeah, that middle portion of the schedule is fascinating because you go to Florida, you have Cincinnati at home, at Iowa State, BYU at home. We talked about a couple of teams on the last episode that have those really big, like you should be circling this one as a should win on the road. It's the exact opposite for UCF, right? Yeah. They have Cincinnati at home, Colorado. Our metric is pinning them as a 9-point favorite right now in that game preseason at home. So BYU at home, Arizona State's the only one that you should circle as a win that's on the road. So the schedule sets up really nicely for them. I love the game against Florida. I think that's going to be a fascinating game to see where Florida's at. If they can pull that one off, just honestly, like the conference championship might not mean as much after. I know that's totally joking. They want to win a conference championship, but if they can win at the Swamp, how huge would that be for the program? And how huge would that be for the momentum as they go into that stretch of Cincinnati, at Iowa State, BYU, and then closing the season? I think that's the key. Like, how many wins can you get out of Arizona, at Arizona State, at West Virginia, and Utah? If you can somehow win 2 of those games, I think you're looking really good in the conference standings at the end of the year.
It would be, I think that closing stretch, if you were setting a line on those last 4 games, the over-under is probably 1.5. You're going to you would think they would beat Arizona State, but can they get another win on that schedule? If they are able to do that, their over-under is set at 7.5, I believe, right now. Which way would you lean based on their schedule?
I lean towards the over because I think they're going to get one of TCU and Florida on the road. I think they will get one of those teams, probably more likely to get TCU just from a talent standpoint. We've seen what TCU's, I think, played KJ Jefferson before, and it hasn't gone super well for the Horned Frogs. So I think out of TCU and Florida in those road games, I think they're more likely to win TCU. That's starting 3-0 if they can do that. I think they can beat Colorado at home to get to 4-0. And then you just need to find 4 more wins on that schedule: Cincinnati, BYU, at Arizona State, and then finding 1 more out of the rest of those games. I think they can do it.
Okay. All right. UCF, 8 wins would be so much fun for the Knights this season. I think it would be a fun way to send KJ Jefferson off into the sunset after his 18th college football season as well. So I think it's fair to be rooting for Gus Malzahn and the boys.
And honestly, they probably should have done it last year, right? They blew the Baylor game.
Yeah.
They blew the Oklahoma game in Norman.
Yeah.
They could have done it last year, and they're going to be a more talented team this year.
So answering the question, how far back is too far back? Trey's telling you UCF coming in at number 10 on our power rankings, not too far back to maybe back. Come up and bite someone, maybe be in the running late in that season. Number 9, the Texas Tech Red Raiders behind Joey McGuire. They've had a lot of fun I think Lubbock has been energized by Joey McGuire's presence at their place, especially after Matt Wells. I mean, Matt Wells was such an underwhelming head coach. They had no offense. The defense has never really been the calling card, but Joey Mack is trying to change that. The offense is going to be fun, explosive. We'll talk about the wide receivers that they brought in the portal. The defense should be taking another step forward this season, I would hope. And all of this centers around the fact that Joey McGuire has recruited the state of Texas looking to find athletes. He said in year one, Garrett, hey, if you're a great athlete, we want you on the team. We'll teach you how to play the position once you get here. We just want you on the team. It was obviously disappointing last year, 7-6. A lot of folks, including you two, were picking them to, if not get to Arlington, threaten to get to the Big 12 championship game. But this year, it feels like they learned a lot of lessons from last year, and maybe now Baron Morton is ready to take this Red Raider team to the next level.
And I think snakebit is a good way to describe Texas Tech sort of in recent history, and especially last year. Look, Baron Morton, good quarterback, I think showed us a whole bunch, and definitely had his moments. But look, man, this team just can't stay healthy. This team just for some reason hasn't been able to find a way to get through a whole season with one quarterback, to find a way to keep all their pieces in place. And, even talking about that, they have this star freshman, Micah Hudson, coming in. I believe still expected to play, but missed all the spring with a knee surgery, kind of cleaning some stuff up from high school. So, yes, you get this massively exciting player, but, maybe catching up to speed. Micah Hudson's going to be fine. Micah Hudson's extremely talented, and he's going to be just fine. But you look at what they bring in. They bring in Josh Kelly up from Washington State, Caleb Wilson over at Florida. You got wide receivers galore. You pair that and hopefully the consistent passing attack coming from Morton with one of the best backs in the country, Taj Brooks. You hope that, you can score points, right? If you're bringing in that much talent, that much, athletic success on the offensive side, you're hoping you can score points. The only thing that might be holding them back is new faces on the offensive line, right? It's how quickly can they gel? How quickly can they get together? How quickly can they kind of figure out, their role? But even with that, I think we all expect them to score some points. The thing that's going to hold them back this year, if anything, is going to be the defense, right? You hope they take a step forward, kind of just some ho-hum numbers last year, nothing necessarily to write home about defensively, and a lot of new starters, right? A lot of new starters, a lot of new faces on that defensive side of the ball. You're hoping that means that those, kind of, mediocre pedestrian numbers turn into good numbers, but it could easily flip the other way if it's not a good fit, right? Now, if there's one thing I think we all believe, it's that Joey Mack knows how to run a program, and he's going to do a good job out there at Texas Tech. And I think that we're all pretty excited for what they could do this year, right? Talking how far back is too far back. If Texas Tech can just score points and just blitz you, they ain't that far back, right? They can score points with anybody in this conference. And there's some good defenses at the top of the conference that might hold them down. But I think Texas Tech is one of those teams, when you look just top to bottom what they bring in offensively, they can score as well, if not better than anybody in the conference, and could boat race and kind of get into one of those, just kind of scoring matches with anybody else on the schedule. So this is an interesting team to me, if for nothing else than just you can score a lot of points, you can win a lot of games. Right now, if that defense can't hold anybody, that's where you're starting to get worried, right? And so when I look at the schedule, I like the way the schedule is set up for them. I think they're going to be able to kind of ease into it a little bit. Their first 5, I think, gives them a chance to be sitting there at 5-0 going into a matchup with Arizona. They got Abilene Christian. That should be a win at home. They do go up to Washington State. They're going to play them on the road, but I think they're the better team, should win that game. They play UNT at home. They play Arizona State at home. They play Cincinnati at home. They should have every opportunity to go 5-0, put up a bunch of points, get everybody settled in, and then you get into the schedule. Arizona should be tough. They'll play Baylor, TCU, Iowa State, Colorado. Should be some wins in there. And then you end the year at Oklahoma State and then West Virginia as well. So, look, at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of wins on this schedule for Texas Tech. It's just going to be, the offensive output's going to be up here. Can you just hold the other teams down a little bit with that defense? Can you stay healthy? Can you not mess around at the quarterback position, right? Can you keep Baron Morton healthy for a whole dang season? Yeah. Can you find a way to get all your receivers on the field? Can you protect Taj Brooks? Make sure he doesn't run himself into the ground. If you can do all that, you're going to score a bunch of points. You're going to have a good year.
Yeah, Tim DeRuyter is there, the defensive coordinator. Bunch of new faces. The defensive line specifically is where they've had so much production over the last 2 years. It's been kind of that back seven that maybe they've had some struggles, especially last year. Boy, the secondary would get picked apart. A lot of new faces, but there is experience in those faces where I think those in Red Raider land are hoping the defensive line can just kind of hold serve, right? They've got some starters back at the linebacker position. CJ Baskerville is their returning safety. He'll lead that secondary. A lot of talent, a lot of athleticism. Can DeRuyter put it all together? And like you said, just be a decent defense that gives that offense a chance where they're not having to score 7 every single trip down the field. Texas Tech, I think, could be one of the most fun teams in this entire conference. They've got the new uniform deal with Adidas. They just finished up a huge renovation of their stadium as well. The Red Raiders have some confidence heading into 2024 in the Big 12. I don't know that they necessarily have their expectations dialed out. I haven't heard kind of one consensus, success metric from them this year, but the over under is sitting at 7.5. And I think if they could hit that over, I know it wouldn't be maybe the ceiling that some Red Raiders are hoping that the team can get. But if you can get to 8 wins with, the likes of Arizona, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia as, the probable losses on that schedule, although West Virginia comes to Lubbock, I still think that's a step in the right direction for the Red Raiders.
Yeah, and they're the type of team, again, like I want to emphasize this, they're the type of team that I think is, we use the term plucky on this show. That's going to, I think, define Tech. They're going to be a team that can get up any single Saturday and just shock whoever's on the other side of the field, right? So let's say that they're just go with me for a second. Let's say they're 5-0. They're at Arizona, and Arizona's kind of taking them not so serious. Yeah, they're 5-0, but it's Texas Tech. We're better than them. And they come out and, again, new coach for Arizona, everything else. They just come out and blitz them. Like, if we're talking about 6-0 going into the bye week, you're probably talking about one of the, odds-on favorites to go in and end up getting to Arlington at that point, right? Because, yeah, there's some tough games in the schedule. I wouldn't pick them to beat Arizona right now. I wouldn't pick them to beat Oklahoma State right now. I think every other game is at least a toss-up for me with this team, because anytime you have a team that can score like this, I don't care what the other team's putting out there. You have a team like Tech who they can stretch the field. They can really get behind a defense with their receivers. You can kind of air it out, but you bring in an elite running back as well to kind of make you pay underneath, maybe catch some stuff in the flats, turn it upfield. It's just going to be too difficult to stop Texas Tech, I think, this year. Now, if you can maybe get to the quarterback, and we're talking about a different thing, and if they don't stay healthy, then take everything I said, throw it out the window, right? But if you stay healthy and if you can keep this offense running on all cylinders, I think this is a team that could be kind of one of those shockers to Arlington if everything falls right.
I'm excited to see Joshua Kelly in that offense. I'm excited to see Caleb Douglas, wide receiver from Florida, transferred in that offense. Certainly stock up on Texas Tech. I want to see what they can realistically set as a floor this season and give us dreams of them getting to a Big 12 championship game. I think that is an important legacy to leave after this 2024 season. So the Red Raiders coming in at number 9. We head up to Fort Worth for number 8 on our list. The TCU Horned Frogs, 5-7 last year. And Trey, we said this time last season that the Horned Frogs were going to take a step backwards. You looked at one-score games. You looked at turnovers. And TCU was crushing the metrics in both of those categories, right? Like, it became so obvious that eventually the house started to begin to win again, that 2024 was going to be some sort of regression, right? It was not going to be the same miracle run that they had in 2022. The problem is they took such a step back that now I think a lot of fans are wondering, okay, who will the real Sonny Dykes please stand up? Going into this season, I think it's somewhere between those two extremes, but TCU, they've got a lot that they've got to replace last year. They're hoping that these transfer portal pieces all gel. Horned Frogs are kind of an enigma to me heading into this year.
Yeah, and I wrote their preview on this one, and I wrote, "What's a median season for
Yes.
Sonny Dykes? Like what is just an average season going to look like?" Because you're right, in their run to the title, they were 26th nationally in turnover margin, +6. They fell all the way to 117th nationally in turnover margin last year. So it didn't just correct; it completely flipped to the opposite end of the spectrum. 6-1 in one possession games in 2022. 0-4 in one possession games in 2023. So it's going to be really interesting to see. This is exactly what Dykes tried to do last year. Sonny Dykes tried to influx a lot of talent from the portal really quickly. It just didn't gel very well. They had a lot of turmoil at the quarterback position with Chandler Morris, getting hurt and having to turn it over to sorry, I'm blanking on the guy's name that's starting a quarterback for them this year.
Josh Hoover.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, it's really interesting to see how it's all going to gel because they did the exact same thing again. They dipped into the portal really heavily. They brought in a couple of nice pieces. The wide receiver room, we were high on it last year, and it just whether it's the quarterback play that caused this or they just didn't live up to the hype. The wide receiver room just didn't have the go-to playmaker like they had with Quentin Johnson. So bringing Eric McAllister from Boise State, a potential big play player right there. Drake Dabney coming up from Baylor at the tight end room. They brought in Ken Seals as a depth piece to the quarterback room. I think that's a really interesting addition. Maybe shows that they feel like they need some sort of backup plan, break glass in case of emergency plan there. But and brought some guys in on the defensive side too. Devin Deal from Tulane, a couple of Caleb Elam's to the linebacker room. So
from Cal.
Yeah, a couple of really nice pieces on the defensive side of the ball, but we just got to see if it's going to gel together, right? And they're going to have to replace Amani Bailey, who was like the one guy that was doing things offensively very consistently for them. We just got to see what consistency looks like for TCU. That's the key word this year. What does a consistent season look like? And it's a really interesting situation they find themselves in because I don't think Sonny Dykes is on the hot seat by any stretch of the imagination. But if you have another season closer to last year, even if you go 6-6 and make a bowl game, I think people are going to start to talk and wonder if 22 was a fraud or if it's something they can ever expect again.
Yeah, you don't want your fan base saying that you wished upon a star and got lucky, right? In that 22 season. That was a special team. That was a special team that made an incredible run. TCU has enough talent to back that up, to get to 8-9 wins, especially in this new look Big 12 without Texas and Oklahoma. Although maybe given the recent history, that's taken a win off their schedule to have the Longhorns exit. But you look at their schedule for 2024, their over-under is at 7.5. And I think that is very doable to get to 8-9 wins if you pull off an upset, right? Stanford to start, that should be a win, although you are on the road. You've got Long Island, UCF at home, and then at SMU. This is a game that TCU has won the last couple of seasons, and like 2 years ago, won very handily over SMU. But this isn't the same Ponies team that they're going to run into this year. They're on the road. That's going to be a hostile environment, a quote-unquote ACC crowd that shows up for that. For me, I've got the back-to-back of SMU and at Kansas State circled as that defining two-pack for TCU. I think we're going to learn so much from this Horned Frogs team early on in weeks 4 and 5.
Yeah, that'll probably decide if they hit their over or not, right? If they go 2-0 in those games, then the hype train is on. We're looking at how many games can they realistically win. Yeah. Are they a true playoff contender? If they go 0-2, which I think is a very real possibility, we're starting to ask a lot of questions. So yeah, I think I circled when I wrote the preview, I put the crucial stretch as Utah through Arizona. That's at Utah, Texas Tech, at Baylor, Oklahoma State, Arizona. That is a tough run of games, but It doesn't matter if you go 0-2 against SMU and UCF, right? Because if you go 0-2 in those games, then okay, we're not really taking you seriously as a championship contender in this conference. It doesn't really matter what you do against the true championship contenders.
TCU can stop the run this year, and if they can be more explosive in the passing game, I think they're going to be fine. Now, like you mentioned, we're going to have to replace Imani Bailey. You're going to have a balanced offense. Josh Hoover cannot, I don't think, pilot this ship by himself. But losing Dominic Williams to Oklahoma was a brutal blow to that run defense. They've got to show me early they can still be physical enough in the trenches to get off the field, especially on third down. And then I can't wait to see what this offense should rebound as in 2024. It's frustrating to watch them at times last year. I know that Horned Frog fans were not happy, but man, if you're going to get to 8 wins this year, we're going to have to play a little bit more consistent on both sides of the ball, not turn it over quite as much.
And Josh Hoover, to give him some credit, like he was not supposed to play the role that he had to play last year. He got thrown into it. He got a ton of valuable experience, but 15-9 touchdown to interception ratio. There just wasn't enough explosive play. There wasn't enough consistent good to above average play to overcome some of the lumps that he took as he learned the position on the fly. So I think he'll be better, and I think that'll make the offense better just on its own. But definitely needs to step up for them to reach where they want to go.
2 more teams left in this episode. We've got the West Virginia Mountaineers up next. Trey, I mean, all credit to you. You called early on that Neil Brown was going to do some crazy stuff. That Neil Brown syndrome, as we ended up calling it, was a very real and present threat. And you know what? They got crazy. And they got crazy all the way to 9 wins last year. When everyone had them counted out, they were voted dead last in the Big 12 media poll last preseason. They go 6-3 in the conference. This year, the expectations for the Mountaineers are really, really high. Their over-under is low, but that hasn't dissuaded the fans up for the Mountaineers from being really bullish on making it to Arlington. Garrett, I think the issue, though, for West Virginia is their defense lost so many starters from a unit last year that really carried them. I mean, the offense had to figure it out. Garrett Green statistically was nothing special, but that defense really carried them. The question, I think, for the Mountaineers coming in this year, can they exceed that over-under of 6.5? It would mean that the defense took a lot of steps forward and replace that production successfully.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm done trying to predict what Neil Brown's going to do. I'm
with you.
I'm just not going to pretend like I know because, I'll go through this, analyze the entire thing, and then he'll go and flip it on its head. So not going to pretend I know what Neil Brown's doing or what he's thinking. But inside that noggin somewhere, he's got to be thinking, man, I got to find a way to increase the production in the passing game, right? Because you've got a very good quarterback in Garrett Green. He's not necessarily, Mr. World Beater last year. Got to get the completion percentage up, right? Only completed 53% of his passes, but the yardage was big. He was, chucking it long and having some success doing it. Got to find his underneath stuff, right? Got to find ways to, maybe compete in that intermediate passing area. But yeah, you're right. Like the defense is going to probably take a step back. How big a step back is the question, right? They did pretty well replacing a lot of guys in the secondary, maybe a little bit concerned about up front and seeing what they can do to stop the run. I'm not going to doubt them because they did really well last year, but we got to wait and see what this is going to look like on the field in terms of their defensive production. And to me, when you're flipping it back over the offense real quick, when you're looking at the offensive side of the football, they bring back a lot of guys in the receiving corps, but nobody really stood out as like, oh, that's our alpha, right? That's our number one. He's our primary guy. He's the world beater. Somebody has to step up, in my opinion, for them to have the kind of success they had last year. Because if you look at some of what he did, or what this team did last year, there was a lot of escaping, right? There was a lot of, we won this game, but not by a whole lot, right? If you break down some of the scores from last year, they beat Texas Tech by 7. They beat TCU by 3. They beat, they beat some of the newcomers by a bunch. But then you go down, even into the year, Baylor, they only beat Baylor by 3. That was not a very good Baylor team last year. And so, for me, I'm looking at a lot of the schedule, and I'm saying, like, even looking at Pittsburgh last year, not a very good Pittsburgh team either. They beat them 17-6, right? So I'm looking at this West Virginia team, and I'm saying you got to find a way to move the ball more consistently through the air. You got to find a way to complete more passes, right? Keep drives going, not just, chuck it up there. They're going to be good in the run game. They had, I think, the third best rushing attack last year. And so they should keep that up. They bring back a lot of those pieces. So keep the run game going, complete a few more passes to make up for some of those deficiencies on the defensive side, if there is that kind of regression. And I think you can find your way back to some wins this year. Much tougher schedule this year.
Yes.
But I think they can find their way back to some wins this year. But end of the day, they have to take a step forward on offense. You can't play that poorly on offense and expect to win that many games.
Penn State to start, Kansas in week 4, at Oklahoma State off a bye. Iowa State follows them up. Kansas State on homecoming weekend, at Arizona after that. Maybe their last 4 winnable, at Cincinnati, Baylor, UCF, at Texas Tech. But this schedule is brutal. And I think if you haven't studied West Virginia, you might be, or maybe if you have, you're going, man, 6.5 feels low. There's why. You have the potential for 6 losses if it goes off the rails right there in the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a thing where they're going to have to find it pretty quick. And I don't think it's going to happen against Penn State. I look, at the end of the day, this is still a better Penn State team. It is at home, so you have that going for you. And again, like with a guy like Garrett Green who likes to sling it downfield, you could get some big plays, and who knows. But I don't think it happens week 1. You get Albany, you go to Pittsburgh, and pretty much by then, that's when it's got to get started, right? Like, you've got to find it. You got to figure out what you're doing because, yeah, there's a stretch of games there that are very losable, right? There's a lot of games there in the middle. So this could be one of those kind of classic win a couple games, lose a bunch of games, then win a couple more games at the end. And that could be what we're looking at. I don't know how to judge this. Again, I've kind of given up on judging Neal Brown. For all I know, he's going to go out, beat Penn State, and then lose 6 in a row or something like that. This is just kind of what I'm giving up on the Neal Brown guessing. What I do think is likely is that they'll be able to finish strong because, again, like you're saying, at Cincinnati, Baylor, UCF, and at Texas Tech, I think they can build some momentum in the back half of that schedule and win a couple more games to maybe get to their bowl game or get to their over.
The rushing duo of Jaheim White, C.J. Donaldson is going to be fun to watch. C.J. Donaldson was so good a season ago. We mentioned all the new faces on the defense, but boy, the coaching staff is very confident in what they're going to put on the field. So keep an eye on West Virginia. I think if they get it right, this is a team that's really, really dangerous. Could start picking off teams that are ranked in front of them, and then you look up and West Virginia is contending for a Big 12 title. Final team in this block is the Iowa State Cyclones. Trey, you were on their bandwagon last year when it was, completely bleak. It is darkest before the dawn, and you decided to buy at the perfect time.
Buy low, baby.
That's right. This year, I've joined you on that bandwagon. I've got Iowa State going 9-3. Tell us how we can get there.
Well, you get there by bringing pretty much the whole team back that got to a bowl game against all odds last year. 7-5 in the regular season. Really, really solid after a really rough start. I was really regretting that bye after week 3 when they lost to Ohio last year, and the offense just looked completely out of sorts. But something clicked with Rocco Beck and something clicked with those receivers, and they threw the ball really well last year, better than a lot of previous Iowa State teams had, even going back to when Brock Purdy was there. So a lot of fun talent on this offense. They bring back, again, pretty much everybody. I think all 5 offensive linemen are back from last year. Quarterback's back. Abu Sama broke out towards the end of the year at the running back position last year. Go put on the Farmageddon tape in the snow. You'll love the Snow Bowl game. You'll love even more just how much he gashed the Kansas State defense in that game. So the offense is going to be really, really fun. They did lose TJ Tampa. That's really the only big star player that they lost last year. NFL draft pick out of the cornerback position. But, man, it's just kind of a run it back scenario. How rare are those in the era of the transfer portal where they didn't really take a ton of guys. They reached in and got a couple of interesting additions. They didn't really lose anybody of note, but man, like it's just a true run it back situation. If you believe in the progression, we've seen Matt Campbell do it before, where he just keeps the team together, and the next year they make one year they make a bowl game, the next year they're competing for a conference title. Buy into it. I think the schedule sets up really nicely for them. I don't want to give them less time, but there's just less things to talk about with Iowa State with the lack of moving parts for them.
Exactly. I mean, it really is a carbon copy of what we got last year, and now just build on it. The returning production is one of the best in the entire country. You look down, like you get a preview magazine where like Lindy's, for instance, where they put returning starters in bold, and the entire Iowa State team essentially is just bolded out. I mean, it's really encouraging to see. Rocco Becht ended up being newcomer of the year. Last year, you talked about Abu Sama, the emergence that he had. I think Iowa State feels really good about the offense that they're going to take, especially into Kinnick Stadium in week 2. Now they got to get through North Dakota to start, but I've been on record. I think Iowa State finds a way to get it done against Iowa this year. And that's, given the fact that Iowa's probably going to return a really elite defense. Once again, that's just what they do. But I'm high on the Clones this year. Their schedule, what do you have as their critical stretch for Iowa State? Because I see 2 different points where if they succeed there, you're going to Arlington, Big 12 champion, Iowa State is happening.
To me, we're going to figure it out in the West Virginia through Texas Tech stretch. That's where we're going to really figure out how far Iowa State can go this year, because other than the Iowa game, I really don't see them having a ton of problems at the beginning of the year. They're at Houston, Baylor at home. Then it's at West Virginia, UCF at home, bye week, Texas Tech at home. I love that they get those 2 games at home against UCF and Texas Tech. That West Virginia road trip is going to be really, really interesting to see where West Virginia is by that time of the year. But how they do in that stretch, if they can go 2-1 there, I think you got to beat one of UCF and Tech at home. You hope that you can beat both of them. But if you can beat 1 or 2 of those at home and then see how you do against West Virginia, I think that's what's deciding if you're competing for a Big 12 title.
Getting Kansas on the road, but not on Kansas's campus, right? That game's going to be played in Arrowhead. I think that helps the Cyclones a lot. Cincinnati at home, and then you go to Utah, but you do get Farmageddon at home. This is going to be must-watch TV down the stretch. I mean, we've joked 10 teams, 12 teams, however many teams in contention for the Big 12 title down the stretch. I think Iowa State is going to be right there in the center of the storm, baby, trying to make it all the way to Arlington. Big 12 might cannibalize itself. It might separate itself early. September is like the month of the Big 12, is it not? I think we've got some conference games early on, some big-time conference games early on in the Big 12. But I think it's going to be the gift that keeps on giving all year long.
Absolutely. And it typically is. We see surprises in this conference week in and week out, year after year after year. It is the gift that keeps giving the whole year.
Well, let us know what order you had these teams on. How far is too far back for you and your projections of the Big 12? We appreciate you listening here tonight. We've got the final episode of the Big 12 series coming out Friday morning if you're listening to these live. If not, we'd love if you would subscribe, hit that icon, follow us over on our social media at 3TechPause where you can find us. And we'd love to continue the conversation with you offline as well. For Trey Reeves and Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Until next time, so long, everybody.
Gracious him. How about